A single mother desperately needs money, so she accepts a job as a caregiver. Little did she know she would be taking care of a millionaire in a wheelchair. Amid baths and troubles, the future would surprise them both in this passionate story. Sarah Thompson adjusted her name badge from St. Mary's Hospital one last time, her hands trembling slightly as she organized her belongings in the small locker room closet. After 5 years as a nursing assistant, this would be her final shift. The hospital's restructuring had resulted in dozens of layoffs, and she was among the employees let go. "Mom, are you sad?" The sweet voice of Ethan, her 6-year-old son, echoed in her mind. She had left the boy at Mrs. Wilson's house, her trusted neighbor, before coming for this final shift. Her son's question still tugged at her heart. How could she explain to a child that in just 1 month, all of her savings had been depleted by basic expenses? The shift passed like a painful farewell. Sarah knew every corridor, every room, every procedure. She had started here as an intern, earning her place through dedication and empathy. Patients always praised her caring manner, especially with the elderly, whom she treated with special patience. "Thompson, do you have a moment?" The voice of Nancy, her supervisor, interrupted her thoughts. "I know it's your last day, but I need help with Mr. Anderson in room 304. He's being particularly difficult today." Sarah nodded, following down the hallway toward the indicated room. Mr. Anderson was known for his challenging temperament, but she always managed to calm him down. Upon entering the room, she found the elderly man agitated, refusing to take his medications. "Mr. Anderson, I brought that chamomile tea you like," said Sarah, using her gentlest tone. It was a lie, it was just water, but this little trick always worked. "It will help with the medicine." The man who moments before had been unyielding accepted the medication without further protest. It was this gift with difficult people that made Sarah stand out in her work. How would she survive without this job? How would she keep the small apartment where she lived with Ethan? At the end of the shift, her colleagues organized a small farewell in the break room. Chocolate cake, coffee, and tight hugs. Jessica, her best friend at the hospital, couldn't hold back her tears. "Sarah, you're the best of us. What they're doing isn't fair," said Jessica, handing her an envelope. "We pooled some money. It's not much, but it might help until you find something new." Sarah felt her eyes well up, but she kept a smile on her face. She couldn't break down, not now. Ethan needed her to be strong. She tucked the envelope in her bag without opening it. Her dignity wouldn't allow her to check the amount in front of everyone. At home, after picking up Ethan from the neighbors, Sarah prepared a simple dinner: rice, beans, and a fried egg for each of them. She watched her son eating animatedly, talking about his day at school, about the drawing he had made, about how he was learning to read bigger words. "Mom, why aren't you going to work at the hospital anymore?" asked Ethan, his large brown eyes fixed on her, full of curiosity. "Sometimes, honey, things change," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I'll find a new job, an even better one. You'll see." After putting Ethan to bed, Sarah sat at the small kitchen table with bills spread out in front of her. The rent was overdue, the electricity bill had a disconnection notice, and Ethan's school tuition was due in a week. The severance pay would barely cover 2 months of expenses. She took out her cell phone and began browsing job sites, sending resumes to every possible nursing assistant position. That's when a different ad caught her attention. Experienced caregiver with nursing background, needed for full-time companionship, on-site residence, salary above market rate. The ad was from a reputable agency, and the address indicated one of the most upscale neighborhoods in the city. Sarah hesitated for a moment. Living at work would mean drastic changes for her and Ethan. But the offered salary was almost 3 times her old hospital salary. With trembling hands, she clicked the apply button. On the phone screen, a message appeared almost instantly. "Interview tomorrow at 9 a.m., Blackwood Manor, 1000 Oak Avenue." Sarah looked at the room where Ethan slept peacefully. For him, she would face any challenge. She had no idea that this application would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The taxi stopped in front of an imposing wrought-iron gate. Sarah nervously adjusted the navy blue blazer she had bought at a clearance sale 2 years ago, her most formal outfit. She paid the fare with part of the money her hospital colleagues had given her and took a deep breath before pressing the intercom. "Blackwood Manor, good morning," a formal female voice answered. "Good morning, I'm Sarah Thompson. I have an interview scheduled for 9 o'clock. The gate opened silently, revealing a meticulously manicured garden. An avenue of palm trees led to a mansion with classic architecture, 3 stories high with French windows. Sarah felt her heart race. The place was even more impressive than she had imagined. At the main door, a middle-aged woman dressed in an impeccable uniform was waiting. "I'm Martha, the housekeeper. Please follow me." The interior of the mansion was a testament to luxury and refinement. Paintings that seemed to be worth fortunes decorated the walls, and the furniture was clearly valuable antiques. Sarah followed Martha through a wide corridor, their steps muffled by the Persian carpet. "Before you meet Mr. James Blackwood, I need to explain a few things." Martha paused near a solid oak door. "The master was a very active businessman until 6 months ago, when he had an accident. Since then, he's changed. He's more reserved, sometimes harsh. The last 3 caregivers didn't last a week." Sarah nodded, processing the information. Her experience with difficult patients at the hospital could be useful here. "One more thing," continued Martha, lowering her voice. "He hates displays of pity. The last caregiver was dismissed for saying 'poor thing' when he dropped a cup." The door opened, and Sarah entered a spacious office. Large windows offered a view of the back gardens, where a swimming pool reflected the morning sky. Seated in a motorized wheelchair was James Blackwood. He wasn't as Sarah had imagined. Despite his situation, he maintained an elegant posture. He must have been about 45 years old, with grey hair at his temples contrasting with the still predominantly black. His face had strong features, and his green eyes analyzed her with disconcerting intensity. "So you're the candidate from the hospital?" His voice was deep and controlled. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Sarah Thompson, nursing assistant with 5 years of experience. And why did you leave there?" The tone was almost accusatory. "Staff cuts, hospital restructuring." Sarah kept her gaze steady, refusing to show insecurity. "Do you have experience with spinal cord injuries?" "Yes, I worked in the rehabilitation ward for 2 years. James moved his chair, coming closer. "And you have a young child according to your application." "Yes, Ethan, 6 years old." "That could be a problem. I need full dedication." "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, being a mother has taught me about full dedication and about patience." Sarah surprised herself with her own boldness but remained firm. A tense silence filled the room. James studied her as if trying to read beyond her words. "The job requires you to live here," he continued. "Your son would have to come along. There's an annex at the back of the property with 2 bedrooms. Martha can show you later. As for school hours—" "We have a driver," James interrupted. "He can take him and pick him up. But I need you available 24 hours, including weekends, and days off. 1 weekend a month when my sister comes to visit." He paused. "The salary will be double what was advertised, plus benefits. But I have 2 non-negotiable conditions." Sarah waited, tense. "First, absolute discretion about everything that happens in this house. Second, I don't want any kind of pity. I'm not a poor thing. I'm your employer. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Mr. Blackwood." James turned the chair facing the window. "Martha will show you your accommodations. You start tomorrow at 7. Don't be late." Sarah followed Martha out of the office, her mind a whirlwind. As they walked towards the annex, she realized her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from relief and apprehension. She had gotten the job, but something in James Blackwood's gaze disturbed her. It wasn't anger or bitterness she had seen in those penetrating green eyes. It was loneliness. The annex was larger than her current apartment, furnished simply, but with quality. A small private garden separated it from the main house. Ethan would have space to play, and she could save enough to secure his future. "He's not a bad person," Martha commented softly as she showed the rooms. "He's just lost. Before the accident, he was different. Always smiling, traveling, doing sports. Now—" She didn't finish the sentence. Sarah looked out the window at the imposing mansion, so different from everything she knew. Tomorrow her new life would begin. Little did she know that this house held more secrets than she could imagine, and that her heart would be challenged in ways she never foresaw. Sarah's first day at the mansion began before sunrise. Ethan was still asleep as she organized the last boxes in the annex. The boy had been enchanted with the new space, especially the garden where he could play. "Mom, it looks like a house from a movie," he had exclaimed when seeing the place the day before. At 6:30, Martha appeared to give initial instructions. Mr. James wakes up at 7 sharp. He likes to have breakfast on the bedroom balcony, then does physical therapy at 9. Dr. Paul, the physiotherapist, comes 3 times a week. On other days, you'll help with basic exercises. The master bedroom occupied the entire east wing of the 2nd floor. Sarah observed the sophisticated hospital bed adapted, discreetly integrated into the luxurious decor. A ceiling track system facilitated movement, and the bathroom was an example of accessibility without losing elegance. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Sarah greeted as she entered the room exactly at 7. James was already awake, looking out the window. He didn't respond immediately. "Breakfast is late," was all he said. Sarah checked the clock. 7:02. She realized that punctuality for him meant anticipation. She made a mental note, arrived 10 minutes before each appointment. The morning routine was complex. James needed help with his basic needs, and Sarah soon discovered why the other caregivers had given up. He was meticulous to the point of obsession, demanding that each procedure be done exactly as he specified. "The towel is too cold," he complained during the bath, "and this soap isn't the one I usually use." "I'm sorry, sir. I'll arrange for the change. I don't want apologies, I want competence," he cut her off harshly. Sarah took a deep breath, keeping calm. At the hospital, she had learned that difficult patients often masked other emotions with irritation. During breakfast on the balcony, Sarah noticed that James barely touched the food. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the city could be seen awakening. At one point, she caught him observing the helipad in the back garden, now unused. "Did you pilot?" Sarah ventured. The look she received was cutting. "I'm not paying you to ask personal questions." Silence reigned again, broken only by the sound of cutlery and birdsong in the garden. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Paul arrived for physical therapy. Sarah watched each exercise attentively, knowing she would need to replicate them on other days. James executed the movements with iron determination, even when discomfort was visible on his face. "Excellent progress," commented Dr. Paul. "The sensitivity in your arms is much better." "Not enough," muttered James, more to himself than to others. After the session, while helping James recover, Sarah noticed a partially hidden photo in the nightstand drawer. It showed him in ski clothes, smiling next to a beautiful woman. The photo was crumpled at the edges, as if it had been held many times. The rest of the morning passed between medications, breathing exercises, and an endless series of emails that James dictated to his secretary, Christine, who worked in an office on the 1st floor. Even while away, he maintained rigorous control over his business. At noon, Martha appeared to inform that Ethan had arrived from school. Sarah felt her heart tighten. It was his first day at the new school. "You can go have lunch with your son," said James, surprising her. "Come back in an hour." In the annex, Ethan was overflowing with enthusiasm. "Mom, the school is amazing. There's a huge library and a covered court. And I made a friend, Peter." Sarah smiled, relieved. Her biggest concern was how her son would adapt to the change. "And did you see the big house? It's like a castle. Is the man in the wheelchair a king?" "Ethan, dear, don't talk like that. Mr. James is the owner of the house and my boss. We need to be discreet and respectful. Remember what we talked about?" The boy nodded, but his eyes sparkled with curiosity. After lunch, Sarah returned to find James agitated. He was holding a newspaper with headlines about his companies, and his expression was stormy. "Incompetence," he vociferated upon seeing her enter. 3 months. It took just 3 months for them to start undoing everything I built." Sarah remained silent, awaiting instructions. She noticed his hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly that his knuckles were white. "I need to go to the central office," he declared suddenly. "Sir, your doctor recommended—" "I don't care. Schedule with the driver for tomorrow." "Yes, sir." Sarah paused calculatedly. "Would you like me to organize the documents you'll need to take?" James looked at her, surprised by the absence of counter-arguments. Yes, that would be useful." While organizing the folders, Sarah noticed that his breathing was irregular, a sign of anxiety she had learned to recognize at the hospital. "Mr. James," she called softly, "how about we review these documents on the balcony? Fresh air helps clear the mind." To her surprise, he agreed with a brief nod. On the balcony, as the afternoon sun softened the garden shadows, Sarah noticed a subtle change in James's tension. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and his voice lost some of its harshness as he dictated instructions. It was then that a ball noise caught both their attention. Ethan was playing in the annex garden, kicking his soccer ball against the wall. "He seems happy," James commented unexpectedly. Sarah smiled, noticing a flicker of something different in his eyes. Was it longing? "Children adapt easily," she replied cautiously. James turned his attention back to the papers, but Sarah noticed that now and then his eyes would drift to the boy playing oblivious to everything. The rest of the afternoon passed in a routine of medications, exercises, and work. When night came, and Sarah was preparing to retire to the annex, James called her. "Tomorrow I want to leave at 8 a.m., he said, "and thank you for your help with the documents." It was the first time he had thanked for anything. Sarah nodded, recognizing that small moment for what it was, a first brick in building a bridge over an abyss of distrust and bitterness. Lying in her new bed, Sarah reflected on the day. James Blackwood was a complex man, carrying wounds that went far beyond his physical condition. Something told her that discovering these wounds would be her greatest challenge, and perhaps her greatest reward. The visit to the central office of Blackwood Enterprises revealed another facet of James to Sarah. Dressed in an impeccable suit, he commanded the meeting with a natural authority that contrasted with his physical vulnerability. His wheelchair positioned at the head of the table did nothing to diminish his power of presence. "The third quarter numbers are unacceptable," his voice cut through the air of the boardroom on the 20th floor. "Can someone explain to me how we lost the Asian contract?" Sarah observed discreetly from the corner of the room, attentive to any sign that he might need something. The executives, all in expensive suits and tense expressions, looked at each other nervously. "Mr. Blackwood," one of them began, "after your absence, some clients became unsure about my ability to manage the business," James completed, his voice dangerously calm. "Interesting. I didn't know my legs were responsible for the company's strategic decisions." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah noticed James's hands tightening on the wheelchair controls, a sign of tension she had already learned to recognize. "I want a complete report on each lost account on my desk by tomorrow," he ordered, "and schedule a video conference with our Asian partners. Shall resolve this personally." After the meeting in the private elevator, James finally let the mask of the unshakable CEO fall. His hands were trembling slightly. "I need my medication," he murmured. Sarah quickly opened her bag, where she kept all the medications organized. As she administered the medicine, she noticed drops of sweat on his forehead. "You need to rest," she said, firm but gentle. "That was many hours of meetings." "I can't rest," he responded, frustrated. "Don't you see they're trying to push me out? They think I'm invalid, incapable." "You just proved otherwise," interrupted Sarah, surprising them both with her boldness. "I saw experienced executives trembling at your words. Your strength isn't in your legs, Mr. James." He stared at her, something indefinable passing through his green eyes. Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened in the parking garage. On the way back to the mansion, Sarah received a message from Ethan's school. Her heart froze as she read the content. "Is there a problem?" asked James, noticing her expression. "Ethan had a small accident in physical education," she replied, trying to stay calm. "Nothing serious, but—" "Anderson," James called the driver, "stop by the school before heading home." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to, sir. I can take a taxi." "Don't be ridiculous," he cut her off. "Anderson to the school." They found Ethan in the infirmary with a bandage on his knee and eyes red from crying. Seeing his mother, the boy tried to smile. "Sorry, Mom, I fell playing soccer." Sarah hugged him, checking the injury. "It's okay, my love. Accidents happen. You play soccer?" James's voice surprised everyone. It was the first time he had addressed Ethan directly. The boy nodded, shy. "I like being the goalkeeper." James seemed to consider something. "We have a soccer field at the back of the mansion. It's been abandoned for months, but—" Ethan's eyes widened. "Really? A real field?" "Anderson can clean up the area," James continued, as if talking to himself. "Maybe your school friends could come play someday?" Ethan's face lit up, the pain in his knee momentarily forgotten. Sarah felt something warm in her chest. It was the first time she had seen James show any kind of spontaneous kindness. Back at the mansion, while helping James with his evening physiotherapy, Sarah noticed he was less harsh than usual. His usual commands were replaced by softer requests. "Why did you decide to become a nurse?" he asked suddenly during an exercise. Sarah hesitated, surprised by the personal interest. I always wanted to care for people, and after Ethan was born, I needed a stable profession. And his father? He's not part of our lives, she replied, her tone making it clear the subject was closed. James nodded, respecting the boundary set. For a few minutes they worked in silence, the only sound being the counting of exercises. You know, he said finally. Before the accident, I used to play soccer too. Had a team with the executives. We did charity tournaments. His voice faltered slightly on the last word. Sarah continued the exercises, giving him space to process his own memories. The field is really abandoned, he continued after a pause. It would be a waste to leave it like that. Ethan would be very happy to use the field, Sarah said softly, and I'm sure his laughter would bring more life to this place. James didn't respond, but Sarah noticed his eyes fixed on the window, where the sun was setting over the abandoned field. For the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, she glimpsed a small crack in that wall of coldness he had built around himself. That night, as she put Ethan to bed in the annex, Sarah reflected on how people were similar to houses. Some, like Blackwood Manor, impressed from the outside but held loneliness inside. Others, like her small annex, were simple but overflowed with life and love. And some people, like James, were like fortresses, needing only the right key to reveal the treasures hidden within. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the gardens of Blackwood Manor, something that hadn't happened in a long time. Ethan and 3 friends from school were running around the newly restored soccer field, while Sarah organized a snack for the children in the outdoor area. From the second-floor balcony, James watched the commotion. His face, normally closed off, had a different expression, something between curiosity and nostalgia. Sarah caught him looking at the field several times during that Saturday afternoon, the first time Ethan had brought friends to play. "Mr. James," she called, entering the balcony with his afternoon tea. "The children asked if you'd like to watch their game downstairs." "Don't be absurd," he replied, but without his usual harshness. "I have work to do." "Of course," Sarah agreed, arranging the tray, "but maybe the work can wait half an hour. The sunset is particularly beautiful today, especially seen from the garden." James looked at her, perceiving the gentle manipulation in her words. In recent days, Sarah had learned to read his expressions, to find cracks in his armor of indifference. 15 minutes, he finally conceded, just to check they're not destroying my garden. Sarah hid a smile as she maneuvered the wheelchair towards the elevator. On the way, she noticed that James had changed from his dress shirt to a more casual one, a small detail that didn't go unnoticed. In the garden, the children were initially intimidated by the presence of the house owner, but Ethan, who was already more accustomed, soon broke the ice. "Mr. James, do you want to be the referee? Peter keeps slide tackling." "I don't know if Mr. James—" Sarah began but was interrupted. "Why not?" James replied, surprising everyone. "But you have to respect my calls." What was supposed to be 15 minutes turned into an hour. James, from his chair strategically positioned on the sideline, refereed the game with a seriousness that made the children laugh. Gradually, Sarah noticed his posture becoming more relaxed, and at times an almost smile appeared on his lips. "Penalty!" he declared at one point when Ethan was brought down in the area. "Decisive kick for the blue team." The children cheered or protested depending on the team, while Ethan prepared for the kick. Sarah, serving juice and sandwiches at a nearby table, watched the scene with a warm heart. "Goal!" everyone shouted when the ball went into the top corner, and for the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, Sarah heard a genuine laugh from James. Brief, contained, but real. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car arriving. An elegant woman hurriedly got out, her high heels echoing on the pavement. "James?" she called, surprised. "What's going on here?" "Rebecca," he replied, his expression immediately closing off. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Clearly," his sister responded, looking around with an expression hard to decipher. "Can I talk to you in private?" Sarah quickly gathered the children for the snack, giving the siblings privacy, but she couldn't help overhearing fragments of the ensuing conversation. "I can't expose yourself like this," Rebecca was saying. "They're just kids playing soccer, for God's sake." James's voice had a familiar tone of irritation. "You know it's not about that. The board is concerned. Your condition." "My condition?" The volume increased. Being in a wheelchair doesn't make me incapable of making decisions. Sarah kept the children occupied with stories and games, trying to distract them from the argument. Ethan, however, kept casting worried glances in James's direction. Later, after Ethan's friends had left, Sarah found James in his office, the stormy countenance she knew well. "Your evening medications, sir," she said softly. "You can leave them there," he replied, dry. Sarah placed the medications on the desk, but didn't immediately withdraw. The children loved the afternoon. Ethan said it was the best Saturday of his life. James didn't respond, but his fingers drummed on the desk, a sign of agitation she had learned to recognize. "You know," she continued, risking, "sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand, of what's different from what they were used to. I don't need your psychological analyses," he cut her off, but without the usual harshness. "I'm not analyzing, sir, just sharing an observation." Sarah paused. Ethan was afraid too when we arrived here, afraid of the new, the different. But today he saw this place as a home. James finally looked at her, his intense green eyes meeting hers. For a moment, Sarah saw there not the embittered businessman, but the man who laughed while refereeing a children's game. "I have a video conference at 7 tomorrow," he said, changing the subject. "I need the reports organized." "Yes, sir. I'll be here at 6:30. As Sarah withdrew, she noticed that the crumpled photo she had seen in the drawer was now in a frame on the desk, a small but significant change. Small victories, she thought. This is how the highest walls began to fall. The morning began with a storm that wasn't in the weather forecast. The thunder made Ethan run to Sarah's bed before dawn, and the heavy rain transformed the mansion's gardens into small lakes. "The power's out on the east side," Martha informed anxiously when Sarah arrived at the main house. "Mr. James's room generator is working, but the elevator—" Sarah immediately understood the implication. Without the elevator, James was isolated on the second floor. "I've already tried calling maintenance, but with this storm—" "His morning medication," Sarah remembered, checking the clock. "He can't delay taking it." Climbing the service stairs, Sarah found James already awake, his expression even grimmer than usual. The generator light created restless shadows in the room, and the thunder seemed to make the windows tremble. "Good morning, sir," she greeted, trying to maintain the normalcy of the routine. "Nothing good about it," he replied tersely. "I already know about the elevator situation, the video conference with Asia." "We can do it from your laptop," Sarah suggested, preparing his medications. "The internet signal is working." "And appear even more incapable?" "Conducting a decisive meeting from the bedroom, like an invalid." "What matters is the content of the meeting, not the location," Sarah argued, keeping her voice calm as she measured his blood pressure. "It's a bit high today." "Obviously it's high. I'm trapped up here like a—" A particularly loud thunderclap interrupted him, and at the same moment, a child's scream echoed through the mansion. "Ethan!" Sarah instinctively turned towards the door. "Go," said James, surprising her. "Take care of him first." Sarah found Ethan in the hallway, trembling. The boy had tried to follow her to the main house and was now terrified by the storm. "Mom, it's so dark," he sobbed, clinging to her waist. Without thinking twice, Sarah picked him up and returned to James's room. To her surprise, the businessman didn't protest when she entered with the boy. "I'm sorry, sir," she began, but James interrupted her with a gesture. "He can stay," he said, his voice softer than normal. "I didn't like storms either when I was his age." Ethan, still clinging to his mother, looked curiously at James. "You know what my father used to tell me?" James continued, surprising Sarah with his almost gentle tone. "That thunder is just the clouds bowling." "Bowling?" Ethan asked, interested despite his fear. "Yes, and when there's a really loud thunder—" Another boom shook the house. "It's a strike." Ethan gave a hesitant little laugh. "And the lightning." "Those are the lane lights," James replied, a hint of a smile on his lips, "so the players can see where to bowl." Sarah watched the interaction, noticing how different James seemed when talking to Ethan. The usual hardness of his expression softened, and his voice lost that commanding tone he used in meetings. "Mr. James," Ethan called, now calmer, "can you teach me how to play real bowling someday?" A heavy silence followed the innocent question. Sarah saw James's expression harden again, the reality of his physical condition returning like a wave. "Ethan, sweetie," Sarah began, but James surprised her again. There's a bowling alley in the mansion's basement, he said after a pause. It's been closed for months, but maybe Martha can check if it still works. Ethan's eyes lit up. Really, can we use it? As long as your mother approves, James replied, casting a questioning look at Sarah. Of course, she smiled. When the storm passes. As if on cue, the main light came back on, and with it the sound of the elevator functioning again. Looks like we can return to normalcy, said James, his voice regaining its professional tone. The video conference, everything's prepared in the office, Sarah assured him. Ethan, let's go back to the annex. You can draw a bit while waiting for the rain to stop. Bye, Mr. James, Ethan said goodbye. Thank you for explaining about the cloud bowling. When Sarah returned after settling Ethan, she found James looking out the window, watching the storm that was beginning to subside. He reminds me of someone, James said, more to himself than to her. Who? Myself at that age. Before... He didn't complete the sentence, but his eyes fixed on a photo on the wall, showing a smiling boy next to an older man. Your father? Sarah ventured. James nodded slightly. He always knew what to say when I was afraid, even in the worst storms. Sarah realized he wasn't just talking about the rain. There were other storms, internal ones, that James faced daily. And perhaps like the rain outside, they too were beginning to subside. The video conference is in 20 minutes, she gently reminded him. Do you want to prepare here or prefer to go downstairs? Let's go down, he decided. As you said, what matters is the content, not the location. As she helped James with his morning routine, Sarah reflected on how sometimes storms are necessary to clear the air, to reveal truths hidden under layers of protection, and how sometimes it takes seeing the world through a child's eyes to remember that even the scariest moments can turn into stories of bowling in the clouds. The weeks passed, and the routine at Blackwood Manor gained new contours. Sarah noticed small changes in James, a less harsh "good morning" here, an almost smile there. The soccer field was now used regularly, and the sound of children playing had become common on weekends. One night after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah returned to the main house for her last round. She found James in his office, immersed in papers, the desk lamp creating dancing shadows on his concentrated face. Your evening medication, sir, she said, placing the pills and a glass of water on the desk. James raised his eyes from the documents, seeming to notice for the first time how late it was. Thank you, he murmured, a gratitude that had become more frequent in recent days. Sarah was about to withdraw when she noticed a photo on the desk, different from the usual one. In this one, James appeared smiling next to a dark-haired woman, both dressed for what seemed to be a gala event. My ex-fiancée, Olivia, said James, surprising Sarah by noticing her gaze. This was 2 years ago at the company's winter ball. Sarah hesitated, unsure whether to comment or not. James rarely spoke of his past, especially relationships. She was beautiful, Sarah ventured. She was, James agreed, his voice laden with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite decipher. And ambitious. We had plans to expand the business internationally. She would be the vice president of the new branch in Europe. What happened? Sarah asked before she could stop herself. James turned the chair facing the window. Outside, the full moon bathed the gardens in an ethereal light. The accident happened, he answered after a long silence. We were returning from a business trip. I insisted on piloting, even though I was tired. The helicopter, his voice faltered. Olivia was in the co-pilot seat. Sarah felt her heart tighten. She survived, James completed. With some scratches and a broken leg, physically she recovered in a few weeks. And emotionally, Sarah asked softly. James let out a bitter laugh. She stayed by my side in the hospital for a month, said we'd overcome it together, that nothing would change between us. He paused, his eyes fixed on a distant point. Until the day the doctors confirmed I would never walk again. Sarah remained silent, feeling that any word would be inadequate at that moment. Olivia couldn't handle it, he continued. She said she loved me, but couldn't dedicate her life to caring for someone in my condition, that she had dreams, ambitions. I'm sorry, Sarah murmured. Don't be, James replied, his voice regaining some of its usual hardness. She was right. I would have been a burden. Sir, Sarah began, feeling a sudden wave of indignation. You are not a burden. You're a brilliant man who needs help even to take a bath. He cut her off, bitterly. Who can't climb a simple staircase without... Who commands a business empire from a wheelchair? Sarah interrupted, surprising them both with her boldness. Who makes executives tremble with a word? Who taught my son about bowling in the clouds and brought life back to this mansion? James stared at her, his intense green eyes in the dim light. For a moment, Sarah feared she had crossed an invisible line. Why are you still here, Sarah? He asked, his voice softer. You must have received better offers by now. Hospitals, private clinics. Sarah felt the weight of that question. It was true, she had received some proposals in recent weeks. But the idea of leaving Blackwood Manor, of leaving James, because this is where I should be, she answered simply. A silence laden with unspoken meanings hung between them. Sarah realized they were closer than usual, the space between the wheelchair and where she stood, suddenly charged with a different tension. The moment was broken by the distant sound of thunder. A new storm was approaching. Ethan, Sarah murmured, remembering her son's fear. Go, said James, his voice hoarse. He needs you. Sarah nodded, heading for the door. Before leaving, however, she turned one last time. You need someone too, Mr. James, she said softly. Maybe not in the same way Olivia thought, but you need someone who sees beyond the chair. Someone who sees the man you truly are. With those words she left, leaving James alone with his thoughts and the photo of a past that seemed increasingly distant. As she ran to the annex, feeling the first raindrops, Sarah realized that something had changed that night. An invisible barrier had been broken, revelations made in the half-light of the office that could not be ignored. And as she hugged Ethan, calming his fears with stories of bowling in the clouds, Sarah wondered what those revelations would mean for the future, for James, for her, for the delicate balance they had built in this mansion that little by little was beginning to feel like home. The days that followed the night of revelations brought a different atmosphere to Blackwood Manor. It was as if a thin veil had been lifted, allowing both Sarah and James to see each other in a new light. James, although still maintaining his professional demeanor, began to show moments of vulnerability that would have been unthinkable before. During physiotherapy sessions, he started sharing more about his life before the accident, small fragments of memories that painted a portrait of a man who had once been full of life and ambition. One morning, as Sarah was helping him with his exercises, James surprised her with an unexpected question. Sarah, have you ever thought about going back to school? She paused, surprised. I confess I have. I always wanted to specialize in physiotherapy, but with Ethan and the expenses... James nodded, thoughtful. You know, Blackwood Enterprises has a scholarship program for employees. I never thought about extending it to, well, to the house staff, but maybe it's time to change that. Sarah felt her heart race. Are you suggesting that you could benefit from this program? Yes, he completed. Of course, we'd have to adjust your routine here, but... Mr. James, I don't know what to say. Sarah felt her eyes well up. Don't say anything yet, he replied, an almost smile on his lips. Think about it, talk to Ethan, it's an important decision. That conversation opened the door for others. Sarah began to notice that James consulted her more, not just about his health, but about day-to-day decisions. Her opinion, previously irrelevant, now seemed to carry weight. One afternoon, while organizing documents in the office, James made another surprising revelation. I'm thinking of resuming the European branch project, he said casually. Sarah looked up from the papers. The one you mentioned with Olivia? James nodded. The market is favorable now, and well, I realize that postponing plans because of my condition is a mistake. Life goes on, doesn't it? I'm glad to hear that, Sarah smiled. You have so much to offer, so much potential still to be explored. James looked at her for a moment, his green eyes intense. You know, Sarah, it was you who made me see this. Your persistence, your faith in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. The air between them seemed to become charged, a palpable tension that neither dared to name. The moment was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. Ethan came running into the office, his eyes shining with excitement. Mom, Mr. James! Look what I did at school, he exclaimed, brandishing a colorful paper. Sarah smiled, taking the drawing. It was a childish representation, but clear. Blackwood Manor, with 3 figures in front, a woman, a boy, and a man in a wheelchair. It's our family, Ethan explained innocently. "The teacher asked us to draw our house and family." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, unsure of how James would react to being included as family in Ethan's drawing. To her surprise, James extended his hand, asking to see the drawing more closely. His eyes scanned the paper for long seconds, an indescribable emotion on his face. "It's very good, Ethan," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "You captured the details of the mansion well. Did you like it?" Ethan asked anxiously. "Can I hang it in your office?" James cast a quick glance at Sarah, as if seeking approval. She nodded slightly. "Of course," he replied. "There, on that bulletin board. What do you think?" Ethan ran to hang the drawing, chattering about how he had chosen the colors and details. Sarah watched the scene, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions: joy at James's acceptance, fear of what it might mean, hope for a future she hadn't dared to imagine until then. Later, after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah returned to the main house for her nightly round. She found James still in the office, his eyes fixed on Ethan's drawing. "He has a good heart," James commented, noticing her presence. "Yes, he does," Sarah agreed, approaching. "Mr. James, about the drawing, I understand if you'd prefer me to talk to Ethan about—" "No," he interrupted, surprising her. "It's all right. Actually—" He paused as if searching for the right words. "Actually, Sarah, I think we need to talk. About the future. About us." Sarah felt her heart race. "Us?" she repeated, uncertain. James turned his chair, facing her directly. "Yes, us. This mansion, this job. Everything has changed since you and Ethan arrived. And I've changed." The silence that followed was laden with unspoken possibilities, with feelings that had grown silently over the months. "Mr. James, Sarah began, but was interrupted by the shrill sound of the phone. James answered, his expression quickly changing to concern. "I understand. I'll be there in the morning." Hanging up, he turned to Sarah. "It was the hospital. Rebecca had a car accident, nothing serious, but—" "You need to go," Sarah completed, immediately understanding. "I'll prepare everything for us to leave early." James nodded, grateful. As Sarah moved around the office, organizing documents and making necessary calls, they both knew that the conversation they were about to have would have to wait. But something had irrevocably changed that night. As the mansion prepared for a busy night, with preparations for the sudden trip, Sarah reflected on how life could change in an instant. A child's drawing, an almost confession, an unexpected phone call, each element weaving a complex tapestry of emotions and possibilities. The future, which before had seemed so defined, now opened into a horizon of uncertainties and promises. And as the night progressed, Sarah wondered what new chapters the dawn would bring to this story that, without realizing it, they had begun to write together. The hospital pulsed with its frantic routine when Sarah and James arrived the next morning. For Sarah, the white corridors and characteristic smell brought memories of her previous life, now so distant from the reality at Blackwood Manor. Rebecca was in room 305, her pale face contrasting with the recent bruises. Seeing James enter, her eyes filled with tears. "James, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice choked. "I should have been more careful. Shh, it's okay," James interrupted, his voice surprisingly gentle. "The important thing is that you're all right." Sarah observed the siblings' interaction with a mixture of relief and discomfort. It was the first time she had seen James showing so much emotion openly, and it made her question her own role in this family dynamic. "Ms. Thompson," Rebecca's voice brought her back to reality. "Thank you for coming. I know it must have been an inconvenience with your son." "Don't worry," Sarah smiled softly. "Ethan is with Mrs. Wilson. We're here to help in any way we can." The following hours were a whirlwind of doctors, exams, and decisions. Sarah found herself naturally assuming the role of intermediary, her hospital experience crucial in navigating the bureaucracy and procedures. It was during one of these comings and goings through the corridors that Sarah came across an unexpected scene. James, in his wheelchair, animatedly conversing with a group of children in the pediatric ward. "And then, the plane did a loop," she heard him say, wide gestures accompanying the story. The children laughed, completely captivated. Sarah felt something warm spread in her chest. It was as if she glimpsed a version of James that she had always known existed, but that rarely showed itself. "He has a way with children," A voice beside her surprised her. It was Rebecca in a wheelchair, accompanied by a nurse. "Yes, he does," Sarah agreed, not quite sure how to react. Rebecca studied her for a moment. "You know, Sarah, may I call you that? When James told me about you and your son living in the mansion, I confess I was apprehensive, but now I understand." "Understand what?" Sarah asked, suddenly feeling exposed. "Why he's different, more alive." Rebecca paused as if carefully choosing her next words. Since the accident, it was as if a part of him had died along with his dreams. "But in recent weeks, in our phone conversations, I noticed a change. And now seeing him like this," she gestured towards her brother, still entertaining the children. Sarah felt her heart accelerate. "Mrs. Rebecca, you don't need to say anything," Rebecca gently interrupted her. "Just take good care of him, okay? James may seem tough, but inside, he's more fragile than he appears," Sarah completed, surprising herself with her own boldness. Rebecca nodded, a small smile on her lips. "Exactly." The moment was interrupted by James, who had finally noticed their presence. "What are you two whispering about?" he asked, a hint of his old sarcastic humor in his voice. "Nothing, little brother," Rebecca replied, winking at Sarah. "Just comparing notes on what a difficult patient you are." The rest of the day passed in a mixture of tension and relief. The doctors confirmed that Rebecca would be fine, but would need a few weeks of recovery. The question of where she would spend this period hung in the air, unspoken but present. It was late in the afternoon, as they were preparing to leave the hospital, that James finally addressed the issue. "Rebecca," he began, hesitant, "I was thinking maybe it would be better if you spent some time at the mansion to recover properly." Sarah felt her stomach knot. The idea of Rebecca at the mansion meant changes, complications. "James, I don't know if—" Rebecca started, casting a quick glance at Sarah. "We have plenty of space," James insisted, "and with Sarah there, we'd have someone with experience to help with your recovery." Sarah felt the weight of the siblings' gazes on her. "Of course," she heard herself say, as if her voice came from far away. "It would be my pleasure to help." The journey back to the mansion was silent, each occupant of the car lost in their own thoughts. Sarah found herself looking at James through the rearview mirror, trying to decipher his expressions. When they finally arrived, it was already night. Ethan ran to hug her, chattering about his day with Mrs. Wilson. Sarah hugged him tightly, feeling as if the world had completely changed in the last 24 hours. Later, after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah found James in his office. He was by the window, observing the night. "Sarah," he called without turning, "about our conversation yesterday." She felt her heart leap. "Yes?" James finally faced her, his green eyes intense even in the penumbra. "I wanted to say that I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, for this house." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. It wasn't quite what she had expected to hear, but, "And I want you to know," he continued, "that with Rebecca here, nothing will change. Your place and Ethan's is secure." "Thank you," she replied, feeling there was much more to be said but unable to find the right words. When Sarah finally retired to the annex, her mind was in turmoil. The last 24 hours had brought to the surface feelings and situations she wasn't prepared to face. Rebecca's arrival, the almost confession interrupted, the uncertain future. Lying in her bed, staring at the ceiling, Sarah wondered at what crossroads of life she had arrived, and more importantly, what path she would choose from here. Blackwood Manor, which before was just a job, was now the center of a complex web of emotions and possibilities. And in the midst of it all was James, the man behind the wheelchair, the enigma she was still learning to decipher. With a sigh, Sarah closed her eyes, knowing that the days ahead would be a test for everyone in the mansion, a test of patience, of understanding, and perhaps of love. Rebecca's arrival at Blackwood Manor brought with it a wave of subtle but significant changes. What was once a well-established rhythm between Sarah, James, and Ethan now found itself permeated by new routines and constant adjustments. Rebecca occupied one of the guest rooms on the first floor, transforming that once impersonal space into a refuge full of life. Fresh flowers, scattered books, and the occasional sound of classical music emanating from there reminded everyone that the house's dynamic had changed. For Sarah, the days became an exercise in balance. In addition to her usual responsibilities with James and Ethan, she now oversaw Rebecca's recovery, coordinated medical visits, and ensured that the new guest had everything she needed. One morning, while helping Rebecca with her physiotherapy exercises, James's sister made an observation that caught Sarah off guard. "You know, Sarah," Rebecca began, taking a deep breath after a series of movements, "I can't imagine how this house was before you arrived." Sarah smiled politely, unsure how to respond. "I'm sure it wasn't that different." Rebecca let out a soft laugh. "Oh, you have no idea. James was, well, grumpy would be an understatement. He barely spoke to the staff, spent days locked in his office." She paused, her eyes fixing on Sarah. "But now, it's as if a light has been turned on again." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "You're being kind, I'm just doing my job." "No, dear," Rebecca took her hand, surprising her. "You're doing much more than that. You're bringing my brother back to life." The moment was interrupted by James, who entered the room pushing his wheelchair. His eyes quickly scanned the scene before him, an indecipherable expression crossing his face. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, his casual tone not completely masking a note of jealousy. "Nothing, little brother," Rebecca replied, releasing Sarah's hand. "Just thanking Sarah for all her help." James nodded, his eyes meeting Sarah's for a brief moment. "Yes, she has been indispensable." The rest of the day passed in an almost normal routine, but Sarah couldn't get the conversation with Rebecca and James's reaction out of her head. It was as if something unspoken hung in the air, a palpable tension that no one dared to name. At night, after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah found James in his office, as was common. He was bent over some papers, but his mind seemed distant. "Your evening medications, sir," she said, placing the pills on the desk. James raised his eyes, evident fatigue on his face. "Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for everything you've been doing for Rebecca. I know it's not part of your original duties." "There's no need to thank me," she replied, suddenly feeling nervous. "It's a pleasure to be able to help." A silence settled between them, laden with unspoken words. It was James who broke it, his voice hoarse. "Sarah, about our interrupted conversation the other night." Her heart leaped. "Yes?" James seemed to struggle internally for a moment, as if weighing each word. I wanted to say that your presence here, your dedication, means a lot to me, more than I can express." Sarah felt her breath falter. "Mr. James, Please, let me finish," he gently interrupted her. "I know I haven't been the easiest employer, that many times I've been harsh, even unfair. But you saw beyond that, beyond this chair, beyond my defenses." He paused, his intense green eyes fixed on hers. "And that scares me, Sarah, because for the first time since the accident I find myself thinking about the future, about possibilities I thought were lost forever." Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. James extended his hand, lightly touching hers. The contact, simple as it was, sent shivers through Sarah's body. "But," he continued, his voice gaining a note of hesitation, "I also know that our situation is complicated. You're my employee. There's Ethan to consider. And now with Rebecca here..." Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. "It's a delicate situation," she agreed. "We need time," James said, though his tone suggested he wanted exactly the opposite. "To understand what we're feeling, to be sure it's not just gratitude or pity," Sarah completed, a slight smile on her lips. "I think we're past that stage, Mr. James." He smiled back, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "Yes, I think we are." The moment was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Rebecca leaning on her cane. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, her curious gaze alternating between the two. "I just came to say good night." Sarah discreetly moved away, feeling the heat rise to her face. "Good night, Mrs. Rebecca." "Mr. James, if you don't need anything else." "Good night, Sarah," James replied, his tone returning to its usual professionalism, but his eyes saying much more. As she walked back to the annex, Sarah felt as if she were floating. James's words, the touch of his hand, the veiled promise of a future together, all of this swirled in her mind like a whirlwind. But along with hope, there was also apprehension. The complications James had mentioned were real. What would Ethan think? How would this affect her work, her life? And Rebecca? What would her reaction be if she knew about the growing feelings between her brother and the caregiver? Lying in her bed, looking at the moon shining through the window, Sarah knew they were navigating uncharted waters. The tides were changing at Blackwood Manor, bringing with them promises of new horizons but also the risk of storms ahead. With a sigh, she closed her eyes, knowing that the days to come would be crucial. Decisions would have to be made, feelings confronted, and the delicate balance they had built would be put to the test. But at that moment, lulled by the memory of James's touch and the hope of a different tomorrow, Sarah allowed herself to dream of possibilities that, until then, had seemed unattainable. The days following the conversation in the office brought a new atmosphere to Blackwood Manor. It was as if an invisible thread of electricity ran through the air, connecting Sarah and James in a silent dance of exchanged glances and hesitant touches. To the rest of the world, nothing had changed. Sarah continued her tasks with the same efficiency as always, caring for James and now also for Rebecca. James maintained his routine of work and physiotherapy. But for the two of them, each interaction carried a new meaning, an unrealized potential that hung between them. Ethan, with his keen child's perception, was the first to notice something different. "Mom," he asked one night as Sarah was putting him to bed, "why are you and Mr. James different?" Sarah felt her heart jump. "Different how, sweetie?" "I don't know," the boy replied, furrowing his brow in concentration. "You keep looking at each other in a funny way, like Mrs. Wilson looks at the bakery guy." Sarah couldn't contain a nervous laugh. "Oh, Ethan, what an imagination. Now sleep, it's late." But Ethan's observations weren't isolated. Rebecca, recovering rapidly and increasingly present in the common areas of the mansion, also began to cast curious glances in the direction of Sarah and her brother. One afternoon, while Sarah was helping Rebecca with her exercises in the garden, James's sister decided to address the subject directly. "Sarah, dear," she began, her voice casual but her eyes attentive, "how are things between you and James?" Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "What do you mean, Mrs. Rebecca? Everything's normal, as always." Rebecca smiled, a smile that said she knew more than she let on. "You know, my brother was always terrible at hiding his feelings, at least from me." I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah stammered, suddenly feeling exposed. "You don't need to worry." Rebecca took her hand, surprising her. "If there's something happening between you, or about to happen, I want you to know you have my support. James deserves to be happy, and you, well, you've brought light back to this house." Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. "Mrs. Rebecca, it's complicated." "Love always is, dear," Rebecca replied with an understanding smile. "But it's worth fighting for." The conversation was interrupted by James's arrival, coming down the garden path in his motorized chair. His eyes immediately sought Sarah, an involuntary smile appearing on his lips. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, noticing the serious expressions of the two women. "Nothing important, little brother," Rebecca replied, discreetly winking at Sarah. "Just girl talk." The rest of the afternoon passed in a mixture of tension and expectation. Sarah felt James's gaze on her constantly, and every time their eyes met, it was as if an electric current passed between them. At night, after putting Ethan to bed, Sarah headed to James's office for her usual nightly round. She found him not working, as was common, but looking pensively out the window. "Your medications, Mr. James," she said softly. He turned, his green eyes intense in the soft light of the desk lamp. "Sarah," his voice was almost a whisper, "I think we need to talk." She nodded, feeling her heart accelerate. "Yes, I think we do." James indicated a nearby chair. "Please sit down." Sarah obeyed, her hands trembling slightly. "These last few days," James began, "have been intense. Since our conversation the other day, I can't stop thinking about us." "Me too," Sarah admitted, her voice low. "Sarah." James moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I know our situation is complicated, that there are many obstacles, but I don't want to pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just gratitude or friendship." Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. "James, Let me finish," he gently asked. "You brought me back to life, not just by taking care of me physically, but by making me believe in the future again, in possibilities, in love. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. "I feel that too," Sarah confessed, her voice choked. "But James, there's so much to consider. Ethan, my job, your position." "I know," he nodded. "And I don't expect us to solve everything now. But I want you to know that I'm willing to face whatever is necessary, if you're by my side." Sarah felt as if her heart would explode with emotion. Without thinking, she leaned forward, her lips meeting James's in a soft kiss, full of promise and hope. When they separated, both were breathless, as if they had run a marathon. "Does this mean yes?" James asked, a smile lighting up his face. Sarah laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes, James, it means we'll face this together." The moment was interrupted by a sound at the door. Turning quickly, they saw Ethan standing there, his eyes wide. "Mom!" he called, his voice confused. "What's happening?" Sarah and James exchanged a quick glance, knowing this was just the first of many challenges they would face. But at that moment, with the warmth of the kiss still on their lips and the promise of a future together, Sarah felt they could overcome anything. The waves of change that had been forming at Blackwood Manor had finally broken on the shore, bringing with them a new horizon of possibilities, challenges, and above all, love. The dawn found Blackwood Manor in a silence charged with expectation. The previous night had brought revelations that would forever change the course of everyone's lives there. Sarah woke up early, her heart divided between the joy of newly discovered love and apprehension about how Ethan would react. The image of her son standing at the office door, confused and frightened, still weighed on her mind. As she prepared breakfast in the annex, she heard familiar footsteps approaching. Ethan entered the kitchen, his eyes still sleepy but filled with unasked questions. "Good morning, my love," Sarah greeted him, trying to keep her voice calm. "Did you sleep well?" Ethan nodded slowly, sitting at the table. "Mom, about last night." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing this moment would be crucial. "Yes, sweetie. I think we need to talk about that." She sat down next to her son, taking his small hands in hers. "Ethan, you know that Mr. James has been very important to us, right? He gave us a home, a new life." The boy nodded again. "He's nice. He teaches cool things about planes and lets me use the soccer field." Sarah smiled softly. "Yes, he's very special. And, well, Mommy discovered that she likes him very much, in a special way, like grown-ups like each other." Ethan's eyes widened in understanding. "How you mean, like boyfriend and girlfriend?" "Something like that," Sarah confirmed, feeling her heart race. "What do you think about that?" Ethan was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then, to Sarah's surprise and relief, a smile spread across his face. "Does this mean Mr. James is going to be my dad?" Sarah felt tears form in her eyes. "Oh, Ethan, it's not quite like that. It's complicated, but it means he'll be an even more important part of our lives. If you're okay with that, of course." Ethan jumped from his chair, hugging Sarah tightly. "I like Mr. James, Mom, and I like seeing you happy." At that moment, Sarah knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. In the main house, James was having his own difficult conversation with Rebecca. To his surprise, his sister didn't seem shocked by the revelation. "Frankly, James," Rebecca said with a smile, "it was only a matter of time. Anyone with eyes could see what was happening between you two." James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "So you approve?" "Approve?" Rebecca laughed. "My dear brother, I'm celebrating. Sarah brought life back to this house, and more importantly, she brought you back to us. Of course I support it." The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions and conversations. James and Sarah gathered everyone in the main room: Ethan, Rebecca, Martha, and even Anderson, the driver. It was time to make the changes official. "From today on," James announced, his hand firmly intertwined with Sarah's, "our dynamic here at the mansion will be different. Sarah is no longer just an employee. She is, well, she's the woman I love." There was a moment of silence, followed by an explosion of applause and congratulations. Martha cried openly, muttering something about "finally" and "it's about time." Anderson smiled discreetly, and Rebecca hugged everyone, her joy contagious. Ethan, in the midst of all the commotion, pulled on James's sleeve. "Mr. James," he asked, his voice serious, "can I call you Dad now?" James felt his heart expand in a way he didn't think was possible anymore. Looking at Sarah, who nodded with tears in her eyes, he responded, "It would be an honor, Ethan, a true honor." The months that followed brought significant changes to Blackwood Manor. The annex was renovated and expanded, becoming an extension of the main house. Sarah and Ethan officially moved in, although they kept the original space as a kind of family retreat. James, inspired by his new role as father and partner, dove into accessibility projects, transforming the mansion into a model of inclusive design. The soccer field, now regularly used by Ethan and his friends, gained an adapted area so James could participate in the games. The news of the relationship between businessman James Blackwood and his former caregiver initially caused a stir in high society and local media. But the couple's firm and loving stance, combined with Rebecca's unconditional support, soon transformed what could have been a scandal into a story of overcoming and love. Sarah, with James's encouragement, resumed her studies, specializing in physiotherapy. Together, they established a foundation dedicated to helping people with disabilities, using the Blackwoods' influence and resources to make a difference in many lives. On a sunny afternoon, almost a year after that fateful night in the office, the Blackwood family, because that's what they were now, a family, gathered in the garden for a picnic. Ethan ran with his friends, Rebecca played piano on the veranda, and Sarah and James watched it all, their hands intertwined. "You know," said James, his eyes shining with a happiness that once seemed impossible. "There was a time when I thought my life had ended on that landing strip, that all I could hope for was to exist." Sarah squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. "But now," he continued, his voice choked with emotion, "now I know that day wasn't an end. It was a beginning. The beginning of the path that would lead me to you, to Ethan, to this life that I couldn't have imagined, even in my wildest dreams." Sarah leaned in, kissing him softly. "Our beginning," she whispered against his lips. And there, under the afternoon sun, surrounded by the sound of laughter and music, Sarah and James knew they had found something rare and precious. A love that transcended physical and social barriers, that healed old wounds and opened doors to a bright future. Blackwood Manor, once a symbol of isolation and bitterness, now pulsed with life and love. It was a testament that sometimes happy endings are not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new and wonderful adventure. And so, as the sun set on the horizon, casting golden hues over the property, the Blackwood family embraced, grateful for the present and eager for the future they would build together. A future full of challenges, certainly, but also filled with love, understanding, and the certainty that together they could overcome any obstacle.